Higher than normal temperatures ravage much of Europe and the world. The consequences of the hot weather are starting to show their effects. Now, in Japan, record high temperatures have seen dozens of deaths as thermometers have been 12 degrees hotter than the seasonal average. Disaster management agencies are urging people to stay inside as people pour water over pavements in an attempt to cool the streets. And in the UK, formerly green fields have turned to beige as there has been no rain in some places for 54 consecutive days. The country, internationally famed for its rainfall and inconsistent summers, heated up to 33 degrees this week, and temperatures are predicted to rise. Parts of the country have introduced a ban on hosepipe use amid Britain's longest heat wave in 42 years. And in Sweden, the hottest summer for 260 years has seen over 25,000 hectares worth of wildfires burn across the country. That's including in the normally mild Arctic Circle. Swedish authorities have called in help from across Europe, with Norway and Italy sending firefighting teams to tackle the blaze amid the longest drought in 74 years. Well, temperatures are reaching record highs across the planet, from Japan to Sweden, as we just told you, and the effects being felt in the form of wildfires, droughts, and much more. Well, joining us to get a handle on the climate science behind all this is senior scientist Freya Vanberg from the European Union's Earth Observation Program. Copernicus, Freya, thank you for joining us. We just saw there a lot of record numbers across Europe and around the world. How do these fit into the bigger picture of climate change? How do we discuss this, put it in context?
Well, first of all, as I'm sure you've heard many times before, just having one event, you can't link that straight away to climate change without doing further analysis. And since these events are ongoing, this analysis is still outstanding. It will have to be done post-event. And even post-event, we might not be able to say clearly whether this is related to climate change or not. What we do expect, of course, is with climate change for these kind of heatwave events to become, to be something that we'll see more often. With droughts and fires, it's a little bit more complex because there you also have the rainfall playing into the picture. And with rainfall, if we look at Europe, for instance, there is not necessarily a clear trend if rainfall is increasing or decreasing. So if we have the combination of warm temperatures but average rainfall, then we might not see a drought, whereas what we've seen in the last 3 months, or more or less 3 months since May.
But the fact that this is happening, all at the same time in the different parts of the world at the same time, this is alarming for people. So how long do we expect this to continue, or is this part of a cycle?
Well, so it depends a little bit on what you look at. I think if we look at the globe, we have to always stress there's a lot of variability in the system. So if we look at earlier months during the year, we had quite a lot of cold events in Europe. So from month to month, we will see different things happening. When we look at just the very short term, so the next couple of days, as you said earlier in the program, there are forecasts for these high temperatures to remain. But that's...
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much for that, Freya Vanberg from the European Union's Earth Observation Program, Copernicus. Thanks. Well, with the prolonged heat and drought, summer harvests across Europe are expected to suffer, with wheat output across the EU predicted to shrink. Poland and Latvia have already declared the harvest a natural disaster. Well, joining us now is Guy Smith, the Deputy President of the UK National Farmers Union. Thank you for joining us on the program. We saw from the scientific part of this, but what about the impact on people, especially farmers? What has that been like?
Well, we're just harvesting the crops we sow in the autumn at the moment. They don't seem to be significantly impacted. They're down about 20–25%. We think they've been saved by the fact that this drought comes on the back of a wet period in the spring and the winter. But there is concern about those crops that were sown in the spring. Because ironically, they were sown in bad conditions because of the wet at the time. And then they've barely experienced rainfall since, and we expect that those yields to be halved from what would be normal. And then crops like vegetables, which are reliant on irrigation even in normal years. The problem there is that the reservoirs of water that farmers use on their farms are running dry. And on this farm, we don't think we're going to be able to irrigate potatoes beyond next week. And that will really start to impact on both quality and yield quantity.
And Guy, as that impact on yield happens, what about impact to consumers? Will they be seeing any shortages or price increases?
I think it's too early to tell. I think we will have a smaller harvest than normal, but food is globally traded, and there are some parts of the world that are still producing okay. But I think if these weather patterns continue in Britain and across Northern Europe, there are going to be significant supply problems, and that could well mean we have higher prices in the shops.
And Guy, just very quickly, have you had to adjust the way you do farming in the UK, just looking ahead into more weather changes, for example?
Well, farmers always have to adjust to the weather they have, and every year is different. It does seem to me, as a farmer in his 50s, that we are moving from more extremes more often. So we go from extreme wet to extreme dry. And that is making farming more challenging. And I'm thinking about investing in greater reservoir capacity so I can irrigate crops in dry times. And making sure my land is well drained, because in the wet times I need to shift the water from the surface of the fields.